Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Lease Accounting. Deadlines are approaching. Do you have a plan? With the Lear partner and PeopleSoft Center of Excellence lead, Carlos Condi. My name is Jordan Fuger-Burmeister. I'm a Lear's marketing manager. And a couple of quick housekeeping items before we get started. All attendees have been placed on mute for the duration of the presentation. If you do have any questions, feel free to submit them in the chat to panelists or in the Q&A function, and we can go ahead and answer those at the end of the presentation. We do have a quick 30 minutes, so with that, I will hand it over to Carlos.
Thank you, Jordan. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining our webinar. We're going to be discussing lease accounting and the deadlines that are approaching and how you can get ready for them, and whether you have a plan or not, how Lear might be able to help you as well. Like Jordan mentioned, we are going to have a pretty quick 30 minutes here. We'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. It's going to be a pretty brief agenda. We're going to just go over quickly introductions, look at some of the background and history of lease administration and the new standards, the impact on the PeopleSoft solution, review of how PeopleSoft software solutions for lease accounting, and then how Lear can help you get prepared for getting onto the new standards if you already are not on them. With that, my name is Carlos Conde. I am a partner at Lear. I also head up our on-premise or PeopleSoft Center of Excellence. I also lead our lease administration and Oracle EBS property manager practices, where we concentrate on helping customers implement PeopleSoft and Oracle software to comply with the new accounting standards, both FASB, GASB, and IFRS. Just a brief background on Lear. For those of you who don't know us, we've been in business for 16 plus years. Many of our founding partners and myself come from either PeopleSoft, Oracle, or some of the big four consulting and accounting firms. We're a full service consulting firm. We do have quite a large Oracle PeopleSoft practice. We are known amongst our peers and amongst in the industry as leaders in treasury management, so that's a big part of our business as well. We also have strategic advisory services, managed services, and quite a few other lines of business that we use to support our clients. And as we like to state, and you may have heard this before, our goal is to become a trusted advisor to our clients. That is our main focus and main goal when engaging with our clients. We've been doing PeopleSoft Lease Administration basically since the inception of the product, so roughly 5 years now. This is just a cross sample of a lot of the clients that we work with, both in private and public sector. We've had early adopters, we've had people that have lagged behind, but as you can see, we've worked in many industries, many both government and private sector, the insurance, financials, county government, state government, local government. So we do have experience across many organizations and many different industries as well. So next, I just wanted to go briefly into some of the background and history of the changes to lease accounting. And then I'll get into a little bit about some of the delays that have occurred based on extensions and also, of course, COVID-19. Here's a little graphic about the history of some of the new accounting standards. You know, many years back, as far back as the late 90s, they started to discuss the need to move leases onto the balance sheet. For a while, they were really opaque and didn't have a lot of visibility. It was decided that these needed to have a higher visibility and show up on balance sheets for both private, public sector organizations. So in February of 2016, both the IFRS and FASB came up with their final standards, or they published their final standards, and they also gave guidance on when these standards had to be adopted. And GASB followed shortly thereafter, roughly a year and a half after, in 2017. Now, initially, the adoption for both FASB and IFRS was December of 2019. And for the most part, those deadlines were enforced and met by most public sector organizations. For private sector, they had always been roughly a year later, but then because of a delay or a request for a delay by many private organizations, and then a further delay because of COVID-19, they've been pushed out for adoption by December 15th of 2021. So being that we're in the, right now in halfway through September, these dates are coming up quickly. Now, of course, it depends a little bit on whether you're a calendar year filer or if you're a fiscal year as to exactly when you'll need to be compliant under the new standards. For GASB, they were given an 18-month delay from the initial date. So for GASB, we're looking at coming upon the adoption date of June 15th of 2021. Again, it really depends on whether you have run a fiscal year or a calendar year as to when you need to start reporting your leases for compliance. One thing that is, human nature is procrastination. So there's a lot of organizations that have known about this for many years and have, for one reason or another, not started to adopt them or not started exploring how they can adopt them. And we'll talk a little bit later about some of the things you can do to get ready for the standards. But one thing that we wanted to stress in this webinar, because of the fact that we're so far along on the dates, is that past extension and COVID-19 extensions are coming to an end. There has been no indication from any of the governing boards that they're going to give any further extensions. So the dates that are out there that are published appear to be the dates that are going to be enforced. One thing that many organizations already know, but we just want to point out as well, that Excel and other manual processes are probably not going to be sufficient in order to meet the standards. We're talking about inventory of leases, straight line accounting, and then all of the different nuts and bolts and moving parts of the lease, such as rent escalations, multi-lease leases. And so there's going to be a need for something more than Excel for most organizations. One thing we've always stressed, and this can be done early on, is organizations need to inventory and identify their leases. Because of the fact leases have not had to be on the balance sheets for all these years, there are a lot of companies that have leases that they're not aware of. There's evergreen leases, leases embedded in contracts. All of these need to be identified, organized, and then classified as well. Is this a lease under the new standards? Is it a lease based on material threshold for my organization, et cetera, et cetera? And then organizations need to choose a software tool to manage their leases. Obviously, PeopleSoft Lease Administration is not the only tool out there. Even within Oracle's own universe, they have Oracle EBS Property Manager and Oracle Cloud Lease. There obviously are other third-party solutions that are out there that may or may not suit your need. For the most part, I would have to make an educated guess that most of the people on this webinar have some investment in PeopleSoft or Oracle, or are looking to do that. And of course, Oracle's lease administration software, as we'll see shortly, fits perfectly into the PeopleSoft financial system to interact with other modules such as AP, general ledger, and reporting as well. And sometimes people ask, well, what if I don't adopt to the new standards? It's really not a choice that you have. I mean, there are penalties and fines that can be enforced by the SEC for public companies, and private companies also can face fines and other penalties from different organizations, as well as some other risks such as the ability to not raise funds, the ability lower credit ratings, et cetera. So this is something that needs to be done. It is being enforced by the accounting standard boards, and it's something that everyone is going to be scrutinized against. So next, I'm going to move on to PeopleSoft's lease administration solution and some of how it evolved from what used to be the real estate module. Some of you may be aware of PeopleSoft's real estate module. So once the accounting standard boards decided and gave published what the new standards were going to be, PeopleSoft and Oracle were quick to develop their real estate module into what is now the lease accounting module. They did it in a number of phases, initially 4, but that's gone on to grow to 5 and 6, and we'll take a look at those phases here shortly. However, the first thing they did was to create the foundation. So take what they already had in real estate management and make that into, or begin to develop that to lease management. And then they rolled out first the FASB and ISAB compliance, then the GASB, and they continue to develop this. So one thing you'll always hear from Oracle and PeopleSoft that it's not a deprecated product line. It is still being developed with every release, with every PUM update. They're enhancing not only lease administration, but PeopleSoft financials as a whole. So what they did in images 10 and 19 was they prepared the foundation for the new lease guidance. They brought in some of the items that were already in PeopleSoft financials into the real estate module, like the financials audit framework. They brought in tools to import lease data, knowing that organizations were not going to want to have to key all this in. They started to put in some of the bells and whistles for lease administration, such as interim rent payments, both property and equipment leasing, financing and capital leases. They introduced a lease classification assistant to help you classify leases. And then they integrated it with asset management as well, so that you could have your assets that are leased assets migrated into the new lease administration tool. And then finally in image 19, they rebranded the module from PeopleSoft Real Estate Management to PeopleSoft Lease Administration. Following that, in image 24, they were able to roll out the payables lease extensions for both ASC 842 and IFRS 16, so FASB and ISAB. And they also rolled out the receivables lease extensions for both FASB and ISAB as well. And this included multi-asset leases, asset level lease classification and accounting, the capturing of more financial terms, and the allocation of lease payments. Then in image 27, they did deliver a migration and transition activity guide, which allows you to migrate your leased assets from asset management into lease administration using an activity guide that some of you may be familiar with from other modules. So a step-by-step guide on being able to migrate into the lease administration module and get the leases working there with very little technical know-how. Another interesting thing they introduced in 27 was shared product functionality. This was something that a lot of clients were asking about. They were saying, okay, I own asset management and a lot of my leased assets are in asset management. Why can I not use asset management to manage my leases? So since a lot of the already core pieces were in asset management, they decided to enhance it enough so that for simple or basic leases, you could manage them in asset management. So here you can see some of these shared functionality. For instance, in AM, single asset leases can be managed, not multi-asset leases. You can have multiple financial terms within asset management, but for instance, it doesn't handle clauses the way that you probably want them. You can integrate with PeopleSoft AP in both modules. It gives you the straight line accounting that you need in both modules. There are ways of amending them. But then on the lease administration side, if you really need to administer the lease, then that's where the bells and whistles are located. For instance, common area maintenance, operating expenses, percent rents, rent escalation, and then multiple additional reports are available in lease administration that are not included out of the box with asset management. So one thing that we work with our clients to do is to determine, if I own asset management already, do I really need the lease administration license as well? And what are the benefits I'm going to get if I do license it? Finally, in image 31, they rolled out the payables lease extensions for GASB 87. So this is really where they now had a complete module across both FASB, ISAB, and GASB. So, most GASB clients have had longer than FASB to become compliant with lease administration. So even though this was rolled out in image 31, it's giving most clients plenty of time to get prepared. However, the reason for this webinar is to just make sure that you know the dates, you know the functionality, and hopefully have a plan, or if not, can get a plan in place, with our help or with the help of somebody else. So I wanted to just take a few minutes and go into some of the review of the PeopleSoft leasing functionality, just show you a couple of screenshots so you can get some look and feel if you haven't had a chance to look at them or get a demo or look at it yet. One thing that PeopleSoft lease functionality does, it's both, like I mentioned, property and equipment leases. So, it does allow for the management of a lease, as I mentioned before, options, critical dates, attachments, abstracts. It integrates with AP to make the payables. It can integrate with AR for receivables. You can reconcile common area maintenance, operating expenses. It helps you classify, an operating versus a finance lease so that you can help guide you to what decisions need to be made about those. There are calculations of right of use assets, principal payments, interest schedules. It gives you the amortization schedule. It gives you all the different schedules you may need. And then, of course, there's reporting. It comes with several compliance reports built in. Of course, every organization may report slightly differently. So, of course, the PeopleSoft reporting tools allow you to modify the existing reports or build reports on your own as needed. So like I said, I was going to show you a couple of the screenshots that you would see within the lease administration module. Here we can see the asset repository and property record. So once you enter a new lease into PeopleSoft or walk it down from asset management, there's a couple of different things you can do. You can show property information. Is it a building? Is it if it's an equipment lease? Are we talking about a site, a space, a floor? Since you can have a hierarchy of leases and subleases, what's the parent property lease ID, or what's the building ID parent property? Some of the attributes, what's the total square footage, right? Or you can have, of course, a metric system, how many meters, the owners and the occupants. So it lets you keep not only information about the lease, but all the different information you may need in order for reporting, in order to divide up costs, in order to make payments. All the information can be stored within the lease administration module. And like we said as well, you can have attachments to this, any legal documents, any lease documents you may need can be attached to each of the lease administration records. Centralized lease administration. So within the screen here, within this screen, there is a central location to manage the lease, to manage the financial terms. I won't have time today to go through all the tabs on this screenshot, of course, but you can basically show base rent, percent rent, miscellaneous rent. You can manually enter fees, record security deposits, and then do the straight line accounting you need to. Like I said, you can capture clauses, notes, and attachments. It allows you to amend leases. So there's commencement, termination dates. All the information that goes into a lease can be captured within the centralized lease administration pages as well. One thing that it'll do for you as well is it will create payment transactions for you. So if this is a payables lease, for example, it can create the schedule of payments, and then it can automatically interface those with accounts payable, or it can go through the, if need be, you can go through the financial gateway and cash management, but accounts payable is the typical way of doing it. And it can create the payment schedule for you. You can look and approve the items for payment from here. You can set them to be approved automatically. It'll show you the transaction status. So here's where you can generate all your payment schedule if you so want to do that. And then that payment schedule can be automatically interfaced into AP, for example, where then you can go through the normal AP process of having those payments distributed and made to the payables leaseholders, the lessors. And then, of course, with all the payments that are included here, all the accounting that goes with not only the lease, but the payments can be captured as well. We mentioned common area maintenance reporting. So there is the ability to capture common area maintenance, report on it, and distribute the amounts to those who are party to the lease. You can auto generate payments when they're due, take credits for overpayments. I mean, it maintains an audit trail, and is just one of the one of the advantages of using the lease administration module to capture this type of information if needed. We said there's a lease classification test, so it can guide the users through a type A, type B lease accounting decision to determine whether what the accounting treatment should be for this lease. Of course, the user can override it, but they will be required to put in a justification for overriding anything. And it's just a tool that PeopleSoft delivers to make it easier if you have any questions about what type of lease you may be entering into the system. And then here we see some examples of reporting. There is a number of reports delivered based on some of the new reporting features in PeopleSoft, Pivot Grids, BI Publisher. Like I said before, a number of reports are delivered, and some of those may have to be built depending on a organization's needs and desires. Let me keep jumping back for some reason. So now, how can Alir help? Well, so Alir's been doing this for the last 4 to 5 years with a lot of our clients, and before that with asset management. Now, we've outlined 6 steps here to prepare for the new lease accounting standards. The first 4 can usually be done on your own or with your tax or consulting accounting partners, but you want to mobilize your team, because when it comes to lease accounting, it requires procurement, tax, treasury, operations. Then we said you need to inventory your leases. Like I said before, your leases may be sitting in boxes because you haven't had to report on them for all these years. You may have leases embedded in contracts you're not aware of. You have to go find those. Then evaluate your leasing strategy. This can be done with some of your advice, your accounting advisors or your tax advisors, about what constitutes a lease at my organization. What are the material thresholds for a lease? And then become familiar with systems. Right now, you're becoming more familiar with PeopleSoft's lease administration module, but there are other ones like I mentioned out there. I'm of course biased to PeopleSoft to a large degree, but there are other solutions depending on the size of your organization and what it is you're looking to do in the future. Once these steps have been taken, the next step is to implement the new leasing system using successful methodology and the developing and managing an ongoing compliance methodology. For that, we've seen most of our customers and most organizations in general turn to a partner that has experience in the software or in lease accounting, in both, in future compliance, in order to make sure that you have a long-term strategy for maintaining the system once it's been implemented, and making sure you have all the information and support that you need. So like I mentioned before, we've been doing this for the last 4 years and at more than 25 clients, both FASB, IFRS, and GASB. Right now, with the deadlines fast approaching, we have 4 concurrent implementations in flight. And like I said, we're here to inform you a little bit more about PeopleSoft's solution, about Oracle's solutions, and become your trusted advisor. We've been doing that for many clients, not only in lease administration, but in PeopleSoft, Oracle, and many other IT solutions. One example that we did that we consider to be a very good success story is Wynn Resorts. If any of you have been to Las Vegas or just know about Wynn, probably heard of Wynn, a very big organization in the hotel and gaming industry. They were an early adopter of PeopleSoft Lease Administration, so they got the good and the bad. We had to go through a couple of fixes with Oracle in order to get the solution up to snuff. They contracted with us, to come in and help inventory and classify their existing leases, develop a future state process for leasing, to make it, since this is going to be an ongoing, accounting burden they're going to have. They want to make sure it's simplified so that they can do this in the future for both accounting and reporting. And like I said, even though there were challenges to the lease module because it was rather new when Wynn put it in, the resources that Alir has have also been involved in the development of lease administration, and therefore we did have an inside track to the development team at Oracle, and we're prepared to help Wynn. One of the things about Wynn that they had several complex retail receivables leases from the retail spaces that they rented out to high-end stores on the casino floor. And so they looked to the Alir team as to provide guidance on how to handle that in PeopleSoft. And we were able to do that. So I know I've gone through a lot of information pretty quickly. That's kind of the idea behind these quick webinars. We don't want to bore anybody. We want to inform people, but try to generate a little buzz and excitement. One thing that's coming up here in the next few weeks is the Reconnect Dive Deep. It's one of the Quest shows that it's virtual, of course, October 4th through the 7th. We do have a number of educational sessions that we're presenting. And of course, there's many other partners and also Oracle groups that are going to be presenting at that conference. And it's a very good conference to go to, both when it was in present and also this time now that's virtual. So we hope you can join us for that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor for any questions that anybody may have. Give it a few minutes, see if any questions come in here. And while we're waiting to see if any questions do come in, feel free to reach out to myself, to Jordan, or anybody at Alir as to any questions you may have. There's a couple ways of reaching us. Of course, alir.com, our website, is one way of reaching us. And through LinkedIn, of course, Instagram, YouTube. We do have a number of social media ways of reaching us. Of course, in the invite to this, you certainly have some information.
And just to hop in quick here too, Carlos. So while we're leaving the Q&A open for a minute, for those who would like a copy of the presentation, please feel free to reach out. My email is going to be in the follow-up, or we also are going to have a recording of this session available on YouTube, our Alir Inc. YouTube page, and on our Alir blog. Our Alir blog has tons of great content. We've got detailed overviews of each of the PUM images and what they include, similar to what Carlos went over, but in more detail. Lots of other PeopleSoft, Oracle Cloud, and business process content. And stay on the lookout. We are actually going to be releasing our new Alir website mid-October. So we hope that everyone can take a look and engage with the great content on there. With that, I think we will go ahead and wrap up today. Carlos and I will stay on the line for those if you have any lingering questions at the end. Otherwise, thank you everybody for joining today. Thank you, Carlos, for your time, and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
Yeah, thank you everybody for attending.